thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to WallBuilders Live. This is the intersection of faith and politics. Thanks for joining us. Be sure and visit us also online at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton. We're looking at things from both a biblical and a historical point of view. David, we've been at this a few years. We've covered just about every issue I can think of in the culture, but you've got a different perspective today on, what was it? The
price of goods.
The price of goods. So you told me that's what we're going to talk about, and I was trying to figure out how to match that up with our topic. So I'm anxious to see how you do this.
Well, it's pretty simple. Think about what price you're willing to pay for something. Your truck that you've got, or new equipment that you get, or anything else. You figure out the price you're willing to pay for something. What does that price show?
The value of it. Hopefully, the lowest price I can pay and still get the quality I want.
That's right. It shows the value to you. It shows how valuable something is to you, and it shows how much you think of something. Quite frankly, there's some things in your house that you paid a lot of money for, and there's some things you're willing to pay a lot of money for, and there's other things you're not willing to pay a lot for. So the price of goods tells you something about the value each person places on something. And let me just give you a simple example. We had, in the last couple of weeks, we have brought some brand new things in our library that I was willing to pay very highly for. One of them was, we have a D-Day landing flag that was used on D-Day. It was on the third ship that came across. We got it from the family of the captain who commanded that ship. It is frayed. It is torn. Talk about the traditional Old Glory. I mean, it looks like it's been shot up. And this is a D-Day landing flag. And I was willing to pay a lot for that, because that's a very significant part of history. In the same way, I paid a lot to get blueprints. I bought some Nazi blueprints, and I was willing to pay a lot for those Nazi blueprints, because what the Nazis had done was take existing standing churches, and the blueprints, they took the blueprint of the church and they worked it over into a theater or bordello or whatever they wanted for their officers. They didn't respect religion at all. So they're willing to take these churches, these houses of worship, and turn it into something for the gratification of their soldiers. And I also bought some landing maps. The commanders who jumped off the front of those ships and took their troops ashore. These were the sketches they had that said, for 100 yards right and 100 yards left, this is where you can expect to find the emplacements of the machine guns. This is the underwater booby traps that we know are there. So when you bring the craft ashore, you're probably not going to get closer than right here. And I mean, it's fascinating stuff, because we're talking hundreds of thousands of soldiers that lost their lives through that time period. And so I was willing to pay a lot for it. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that we come across that I'm not willing to pay much for. It just doesn't mean that much to me. And so I was thinking about the things, I'd never, ever seen a proclamation from signer of the Constitution, John Dickinson. And I came across one after, years and years. We came across a proclamation that he did for the state of Pennsylvania, and I was willing to pay a lot for that, because I'd never seen one before. And so that's kind of the cost of goods kind of thing. And I was thinking, what am I willing to give up in order to get something that's valuable to me? And we're in a situation now where that for the first time in my lifetime, we're now having to ask that about our own faith. What are we willing to pay? What are we willing to give up? What are we willing to sacrifice to keep our faith intact? And what we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years is people are giving up their businesses rather than give up their faith. Conscience stuff. I've been told that you will bake cakes for homosexuals against your conscience. No, I won't. I'll shut my business down. I'll take away my own livelihood before I go against my faith. We see chaplains giving up their careers because they won't back away from a religious message when they talk to soldiers. We see kids at school taking it on the chin, and in colleges particularly, we've seen people thrown out of doctorate programs because they wouldn't give up their faith, and they were told their faith is inappropriate in this line of study.
We see got like the twin brothers that lost their television show because of it.
Great one. Now the Benham brothers, same thing. You know, they had what was a hit show gone because of their faith. And I don't think that in our lifetimes we've ever had to consider what we're willing to pay to keep our faith and what we would give up. Is our faith worth much to us? All right, if you want me to stop saying that, I'll stop saying that. I want to stay in the program, or I want to keep my business. But if it's really valuable to you, you'll give up a lot to do that. And the story we've got today is ridiculous. The story today of a man who is tops in his field, tops in the nation, and yet would not give up his faith, and as a result lost his job. One of the better known guys in this particular field, and we'll talk about him today, but the fire chief of Atlanta, a black brother, good Christian guy, that won't give up his beliefs about sexuality and marriage. And because he won't back away from his biblical beliefs, he's no longer the fire chief of Atlanta, even though he was one of the top fire chiefs and honored as the top fire chief in the nation. And Obama even took him to the federal government, made him the #1 guy over all the fire stuff there at the federal government. But because he would not give up his biblical views on sexuality and marriage, he no longer has a job. And so that's a lot of price to pay. And it's a good question for all of us to ask ourselves is, what am I willing to give up? If it means, what will I give up? What would I compromise?
Yeah.
And, this is a new era for us. It's questions we've never had to ask ourselves, but it's a question worth asking now.
It is totally. Now I get where you were going, and it is something we haven't had to ask much. We haven't had to place a value on our faith because we haven't had to worry about whether or not we would lose things. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we said someday that might happen if we don't do this or do that. Well, it is happening because the church didn't do this or didn't do that and didn't stand up for these things. So here we are. I mean, this is a great example today. I hope it makes us all pause and think about what is the value of our faith. Back in a moment, we're going to have David French with us talking about this case out of Atlanta where this very highly praised chief has now lost his job because of his faith. David French will return here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. America has a history of great patriots who loved and sacrificed much for their country. One of these was John Witherspoon, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. While president at Princeton, he personally trained many who became important leaders in American government, including James Madison. How could John Witherspoon tell if someone really loved America? He explained, "He is the best friend to American liberty, who is most sincere and active in promoting true and undefiled religion, and who sets himself with the greatest firmness to bear down profanity and immorality of every kind. Whoever is an avowed enemy of God, I hesitate not to call him an enemy to his country." Founding Father John Witherspoon believed that a true American patriot opposed profanity and immorality and promoted true and undefiled religion.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Our good friend David French is with us from the American Center for Law and Justice. David, always good to have you, bro. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
So you guys represent a lot of folks whenever there's any kind of religious discrimination or folks are trying to remove God from the public square. You see a lot of cases like the one we're going to talk about today. This one, though, man, I mean, you talk about going after the best and the brightest simply because they hold religion, basic biblical beliefs. This one had to set you back on your heels a little bit.
Oh, this case is it's unbelievable. Down in Atlanta, watching this thing has unfold has been unreal. It just goes to demonstrate that the way the culture is going, especially if you're in a part of the country dominated by leftist ideology, that no matter what your other virtues are, if you do not have the right point of view from their perspective on the sexual revolution, on gay rights, etc., then you're probably not worthy of being employed So here we had a fire chief in Atlanta who improves the performance of the Atlanta Fire Department in measurable ways. And this isn't just like accounting, or this isn't like being an insurance actuary, or even like being a lawyer where lives are not at stake. This is a fire chief where lives are being saved, and he improved the performance of that department measurably, received accolades and awards. But the instant that he wrote a book expressing his religious point of view and shared it in a very limited way with just a few people who had asked about it on his staff, he's terminated summarily and in a manner that violated the department's own guidelines for terminating an employee.
And David, just to reiterate, the level of awards and accolades, Fire Chief of the Year by Fire Chief Magazine. He was appointed by President Obama to serve as U.S. Fire Administrator. And then the mayor that ends up firing him later begs him to come back to Atlanta, and he does. And then the mayor fires him for, quote, tolerance. So
it's unbelievable. It really is. And here's the other thing about it. No one in his department had accused him of treating any employee, regardless of sexual orientation, unfairly. So he was fired without even the pretext of him having allegedly mistreated somebody. He hadn't mistreated anybody.
So then it was purely for his beliefs. It had nothing to do with actual discrimination or what someone might claim was discrimination. They even investigated to see if he had discriminated, and everybody said no.
Exactly. They investigated him. He was clean. They fired him anyway. And then they tried to claim that it was because he had not received permission to publish the book. Well, number one, he wasn't required under the law to receive permission. And number two, because he's an ethical guy, he had gone and he had sought the advice of the ethics officer for the city of Atlanta. So he had actually done exactly what he was supposed to do. Then they talk about how he disseminated a book with offensive content in the workplace. What he did is he gave it to a few people who asked about it and then shared it with some just a very few senior leaders, and the allegedly offensive part was a very small segment of a much larger book. So, I mean, this is thought control, this is the thought police, and I'm glad to see that he has filed suit.
You know, you mentioned in your article that I think it was maybe the mayor had said something about or maybe it was the New York Times, because your article was really responding to their article praising the mayor for doing this. But someone had said, I think it might have been the mayor, that what they wanted to make sure of was that you could go to work no matter who you love and not be discriminated against. Well, David, what if you love God? Because apparently it's not whoever you love. Because if you love God and follow his commands or believe his commandments, nope, you're not accepted here. You can't work here from 8 to 5. Exactly.
It is really astonishing that we're in a position where essentially what they're saying is if a favored subgroup of people are offended, you're terminated. You cannot work. You cannot occupy that workplace. And it's astonishing that's, we live in a democracy, and in a democracy, people are exposed to ideas they don't like all the time. That's part of living together. That's part of working together. I have been in many workplaces, even workplaces that are organized around common and shared beliefs, and every now and then people get on each other's nerves. You learn to live with it.
Wait, that sounds like my house. That's the way it is at home, right? I mean, you don't even agree with your siblings or your spouse all the time.
Exactly. But the idea that we can say to any group of employees that you have a right to go to work and not hear anything that upsets you is just astonishing. It's antithetical to free speech, and it violates the Constitution.
I got to also ask you, because it had to bug you as a veteran, this chaplain case with the Navy chaplain that was so well praised in awards and, just remarkable service. I mean, everybody talked about him being the best of the best. And, for now to send the signal in the military that you're supposed to be such a wimpy sailor or Marine that you can't handle somebody actually having a different opinion than you. Or we got to get rid of them so that you don't get offended and get your feelings hurt. I mean, that's got to bother you.
No, don't get me started on that. That's absurd. This has been going on for a while in the military, and it's been going on not just in the issue of chaplains talking about homosexual conduct, but it's been going on for a long time, particularly in the Air Force. And this notion that if anyone hears a fellow airman or an officer talking about their faith, that they can't handle that they've got to be silenced, that the Christian members of the Air Force. Now, I mentioned the Air Force because it's been picked out for particular scrutiny by Mikey Weinstein and the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. But this idea that soldiers, airmen, sailors, Marines are such delicate flowers that they can't hear the name of Jesus, or that they can't hear a moral point of view that they don't agree with, these are people who are trained to go into combat where people are actually trying to kill them. And the notion that they can't handle some offhand comments or some words about a faith they may not agree with, or words about a moral point of view that they may not agree with, that's pathetic. It is absolutely pathetic. And it's creating an environment where you're coddling people rather than teaching them to be tough, to live and work in a diverse environment, to defend a diverse nation where, guess what? Some of the people you're defending have points of view that you would find offensive. So this is infantilizing the members of our armed forces, and it's absurd. And, I tell you what, it has almost no constituency within the military. When I was in Iraq, guys would talk to each other about everything under the sun. And that openness with each other and that respect for each other, where we allowed each other to express different points of view, helped build those bonds of brotherhood. If we sat there and thought, oops, I got to watch everything that I say, that doesn't build those bonds at all. It weakens them. It leads to distrust.
No doubt. Got to take a quick break. David French is our guest. Stay with us. We'll be right back on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. The teachings of God's Word are the best friend civil government has because these teachings deal with the heart. Only by dealing with the heart can crime be prevented, for as Jesus explained in Matthew 5, all crime comes from the heart. Understanding this, Daniel Webster, the great defender of the Constitution, once declared, "The cultivation of the religious sentiment represses licentiousness. It inspires respect for law and order and gives strength to the whole social fabric. Whatever makes men good Christians makes them good citizens. Indeed, it is not the good Christians whom the police arrest for armed robbery, gang activity, or other such crimes." Understanding this, the Founding Fathers encouraged religious instruction, for as Daniel Webster so accurately noted, good Christians make good citizens.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. David French is with us. We're talking about the case out of Atlanta and really just, David, in general, this whole concept of getting rid of speech or anyone that has any speech, or in this case, writing a book, and just a few words in that book that might offend someone. Back up and tell me how this should work in a free society. I mean, I consider you a learned scholar. I mean, you're an attorney. You argue before the Supreme Court. You deal with these issues. You love the Constitution. You're a student of history. You've served our military. I mean, how should this work? You just mentioned in the military, having that free flow of ideas created more camaraderie. It didn't tear you guys apart. It gave you the chance to become closer. What about in a free society? I mean, if we stamp out people's opinions, is that going to make us safer or more free?
We need to get a little bit thicker skin, and we need to build a bit of mutual respect. I mean, I know, anybody who is out there putting a point of view into the public square knows that we can get ripped. I mean, I have read comments and statements about myself that, are pretty astonishing.
That you won't let your children read, right? I mean,
I
get some of the...
No way.
Right.
Exactly. And I do not think, let me go find who did that and see if I can get the law on them, or see if I can get them to lose their job or be thrown out of an academic program. My view is the cure for bad speech is better speech. What's so distressing about this Atlanta fire chief case, about the case of Brendan Ike at Mozilla, these are people there was no accusation that they had mistreated a single human being. To the contrary, they had done their jobs with excellence. In the case of the Atlanta fire chief, leading a department that saved lives. In the case of Brendan Ike in Mozilla, he's a guy who, I believe, he invented JavaScript. I mean, we're talking about excellent records, the best of the best. But it was not enough if they didn't have the right ideas. And you've heard phrases from Orwellian type phrases like thought police, thought crime. That's what you're really dealing with here is thought crime, because it is the very thoughts in their head that makes them so offensive. In the fire chief, he put some of his thoughts on paper, and just the mere existence of those words on paper were intolerable and led to his termination. I have confidence in his case.
Now, it's funny you bring up thought police, though, because that's what I was thinking about. It was 20 years ago when all the hate speech stuff first started, coming out on campuses and all that kind of stuff. Those of us that were fighting that, we would say, this is thought police. But no, it's actual actions. You have to take action. But it is thought. It is now leading to just thoughts, just believing something. And it's not like we're talking about some crazy, hateful, deviant, destructive to society thoughts here. These are, thousands of years old, strongly held beliefs by the majority of the country.
It's the very strength of the intellectual and spiritual foundation of these thoughts of the Orthodox Christian idea that is leading to the furious response on the other side. Because it's not like they can go in and talk to this Atlanta fire chief and convince him that Christianity is an ill-founded, hateful, bigoted way of life. If you're going to engage with him in a reasonable intellectual manner, you're going to find out that he's a loving person, a compassionate person who's got a faith system that is grounded in biblical truth and truth that can transform lives. That's not the conversation they want to have, because it allows him to shine. So they're going to try to defeat his beliefs through stigma, to shout down, to prevent the conversation from happening. And we've seen this on college campuses again and again. They do not want to engage in the world of reason. They want to stigmatize, silence, and censor, to rule your statements out of bounds without even engaging them.
That's powerfully put. That's exactly what we face. Well, that's why we have folks like you guys at American Center for Law and Justice, Alliance Defending Freedom, and all these organizations out there that are doing such a great job of defending folks just like the chief, and you in so many ways articulating these things and engaging in that reason and debate. So keep it up, bro. I read the back of the book, and eventually we win.
Exactly. That's right.
Thanks for coming on, Dave.
Thanks so much. Anytime.
That's David French. Back in a moment with David Barton. Have you noticed the vacuum of leadership in America? We're looking around for leaders of principle to step up, and too often, no one is there. God is raising up a generation of young leaders with a passion for impacting the world around them. They're crying out for the mentorship and leadership training they need. Patriot Academy was created to meet that need. Patriot Academy graduates now serve in state capitals around America, in the halls of Congress, in business, in the film industry, in the pulpit, and every area of the culture. They're leading effectively and impacting the world around them. Patriot Academy is now expanding across the nation, and now's your chance to experience this life-changing week that trains champions to change the world. Visit patriotacademy.com for dates and locations. Our core program is still for young leaders 16 to 25 years old, but we also now have a citizen track for adults. So visit the website today to learn more. Help us fill the void of leadership in America. Join us in training champions to change the world at patriotacademy.com.
Let the torch of freedom
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks again to David French and the update he gave us. And David, I know you've got a military family. These cases definitely hit close to home for y'all. That David French was talking about. This fire chief. I mean, these are the these are the tough guys. These are the guys that put their lives on the line for us, and we're acting like they can't be exposed to beliefs that they might not agree with.
I tell you, French had some great one-liners when he said, "Our soldiers are now considered to be delicate flowers."
Yeah.
Can you imagine that the greatest superpower in the world used to be, and we now treat our soldiers like they're delicate flowers? And he's true. I mean, he's in the military and saw it. I was talking to a drill sergeant at one of the primary training bases for boot camp for basic, and he was telling me that now they are no longer, for discipline, they can no longer give more than 5 push-ups to any soldier in basic training. Instead of hit the deck and do 20, they can only do 5, and he has to do it with them. If he makes them do 5, he has to get down and do 5 with them.
You're kidding me.
No. These are delicate flowers we're dealing with. We don't want to train these guys to be soldiers. And also talking about one of the guys in basic that 7 times was caught stealing from others, and they wouldn't dismiss him. You might make him feel bad about himself. And so we are in a situation now where it really pretty is unbelievable. We're willing to get rid of the tough guys, the guys that are doing the right thing, fire chief or anybody else, because others are too delicate. And I love what he said. He said the response on the other side is what he called a furious response. Yeah, and that's true. They don't just shrug it off or say, so what? They go ballistic, and they raise to high heaven, and they make a stink about it, and so it causes everybody else to back it down and be intimidated. And we just can't let it happen. We can't be intimidated and push back. We have to raise a furious response on our side and push back on this kind of stuff.
No doubt about it. Special thanks to David French for joining us today. Thank you for listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.